Before we jump into today's deep dive, just a quick disclaimer. The content you're about to hear is AI generated. We've synthesized it from a collection of authoritative sources like C++, standard stocks, historical committee emails, and retrospectives from the engineers who actually built these tools.
That's right.
Now, let's talk about C++ sane, specifically std.string. If you're a professional engineer, you probably type this every single day without a second thought. But have you ever stopped to, really look at it and wondered why it's so heavy?
It is an absolute beast, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, the interface is staggering. We're talking over 100 member functions.
100, yeah.
And it has this allocator template argument that, let's be honest, almost nobody touches.
And if you look at the history, the C++ community went through what I can only call collective trauma just to change how it stores characters.
That's a perfect way to put it. To the modern eye, std.string just looks wrong. It's monolithic, cluttered, it just violates so many principles we hold dear now.
But that's the hook for today, isn't it? std.string isn't just a utility, it's a historical artifact. It's an archaeological site.
I love that. An archaeological site in a header file.
Exactly. When you dig through it, you're not just seeing code. You're seeing layers of history. You're finding fossils from the 80s, scars from the 90s, fortifications from the Multicore revolution.
So our mission today is to unpack why it looks this way. And the answer isn't because this is the best design.
Never. The answer is always about constraints.
Okay, so to get this, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to what our sources call the tyranny of the Null Terminator.
We have to go way back. Late 70s, early 80s, C++ was C with classes.
Right.
And C didn't really have a string type, it just had a convention. A pointer to a character, a char. You just keep reading memory until you hit a 0.
The famous null byte.
Right. And that convention, which came from the old DEC PDP-7 and UNIX, was a disaster for safety. Forget the 0, you crash the program. But the real performance killer was that finding the length of a string was an ON operation.
Because you have to walk the whole thing every single time.
Precisely. So when C++ started getting popular in the mid-80s, everyone knew they needed something better. But there was no standard. So we got the Wild West of string classes.
Right. This is where every company just rolls their own.
Total chaos.
Yeah.
And they were all so different. You had the National Institutes of Health Class Library, NIHCL, very academic, modeled on Smalltalk, everything inherited from a root object.
Sounds very pure, but probably slow. Lots of virtual calls.
Heavy. Then you had the industry standard, Rogue Wave's RWC string. And on Windows, you had C string from MFC.
The Tower of Babel. You buy 2 libraries and they can't talk to each other.
You spend all your time just converting between them. So the standards committee, WG21, had to fix this. They needed one string to rule them all.
And this, according to Herb Sutter, is where that fat interface comes from.
It is. People always ask, why so many functions? The answer is appeasement.
Appeasement? You mean like they were trying to convince people to switch?
Exactly that. They had to get the Rogue Wave users on board. And those users were used to a kitchen sink class that did everything. So the committee violated the interface segregation principle just to make it an easy port.
So it's a monolith because of politics, not because of technical design.
That's a huge part of it.
Okay, that explains the 100 functions. But what about the allocator? That std.basic-string-char traits allocator thing, it feels like such overkill.
That is my absolute favorite fossil. That allocator is a direct scar from the Intel 8086 processor.
Wait, the 8086, you're talking 16-bit real mode from the 80s.
I am. Back then, memory was segmented. You had near pointers and far pointers. Alexander Stepanov, who designed the STL, needed a way to extract that. The allocator was designed to handle near versus far memory.
So every time I'm on my 64-bit machine and I see that in a compiler error, I'm looking at a ghost from a 1980s memory model.
You are. It's a relic baked into the standard in '98 for hardware that's now extinct. And we can never, ever remove it.
Wow. Okay, so that sets the stage. C++98 gives us this standard string, big interface, weird allocator baggage. But the real war was over the implementation.
The war of implementations.
Yeah.
And in the C++98 era, the king was copy on write. COW.
COW.
Not the animal. No, though the name is fun. It's an optimization. You have to remember the context of the 90s. CPUs were single core, and malloc was painfully slow. A deep copy was a huge expense.
How did COW solve that?
Simple. If you have string A and you copy it to string B,
String BA.
B doesn't actually copy the data. It just copies the pointer to A's buffer and bumps a reference count. They share the memory.
So copying is an O1 operation, super fast.
Exactly. The actual copy only happens if one of them tries to write to the string. Copy on write. And for the 90s, this was absolutely the right call.
But std string doesn't use it anymore. In fact, modern C++ basically forbids it. Our sources said it became a pessimization.
The hardware changed. The mid-2000s came, and suddenly we all had multi-core CPUs. That little reference count became a massive bottleneck.
Because multiple threads are all trying to update it at once.
And to be thread safe, that increment has to be atomic. On by 86, that's a locked instruction, a memory barrier. It just kills your performance.
So an optimization to avoid allocation became a hardware bottleneck.
It was worse than that. We saw false sharing, where threads on different cores would fight over the ref count of a string they were only reading. But the real killer was a concurrency bug in the design.
A bug in the standard?
The interaction. Think about the bracket operator. The non-const one returns a char.
A reference, right. So you can write to it strut equals A.
But the compiler doesn't know if you're going to write or not. It just sees you asking for a mutable reference. So a COW string has to assume the worst. Just calling operator forces an unshare, a deep copy.
So even a read could trigger a memory allocation.
Yes. And in a multi-threaded program, that read becomes a write to the internal state. If you didn't lock your reads, you had a data race, a complete nightmare.
So C++11 rolls around, the big modernization.
Yeah.
How did they kill COW?
They were clever. They didn't ban it by name. They changed the rules for iterator invalidation.
That sounds like a technicality.
It was a regulatory kill switch. C++11 said that operator is not allowed to invalidate iterators. But for COW, that access might trigger an unshare, which creates a new buffer, which absolutely invalidates all iterators. It became impossible to write a conforming COW string.
That is brutally efficient. So if you can't share, you still have to deal with allocation costs.
Two things saved us in C++11. First, move semantics.std.move. That let us transfer buffer ownership cheaply.
And the second thing?
Small string optimization, SSO. This is the modern standard.
And this is fascinating because it's all about the physical memory layout of the object. How does it work?
It's based on a simple observation. Most strings are short. File names, keys, things like that. SSO says if the string is short enough, just store it inside the string object itself, on the stack. No heap allocation at all.
But you have to fit that buffer into the same space that used to hold the pointers and size?
It's incredibly tricky, and this is where the major implementations all diverge. If you look at Clang's libs++ versus GCC's libstdc++, they solve this puzzle very differently.
Okay, let's get into that. What does Clang do?
Clang is famous for aggressive bit-twiddling. A 64-bit string object is usually 24 bytes. Clang uses the least significant bit of the very first byte as a flag.
A flag? But isn't that part of the data?
It works because pointers are always aligned, so their bottom bit is 0. If that bit is a 1, Clang knows it's a short string. It's a clever hack. And because of that, Clang's SSO can hold up to 22 characters.
22? That's a lot. What about GCC?
GCC is more conservative. They want the internal data pointer to always be valid, whether it points to the heap or the internal buffer. It simplifies the code, but it costs them space.
Yeah.
GCC's SSO only holds 15 characters.
And MSVC is similar, around 15 as well.
Right. They avoid the complex bit masking. But either way, SSO was a huge win for the multi-core world.
But this transition wasn't painless. You mentioned a collective trauma earlier. This has to be the ABI break.
Yes. The GCC5 ABI break. This is a moment that I think still haunts the committee.
So what broke? Explain it for us.
An ABI, an application binary interface, is the memory layout of an object. Its size, the order of its fields. When GCC switched from COW to SSO, the size of std.string changed. It went from basically one pointer, maybe 8 bytes, to a 32-byte structure to hold the SSO buffer.
Oh, I see the problem. If you have a library built with the old GCC,
It thinks a string is 8 bytes.
and your new application passes it a 32-byte string.
Boom. Stack corruption. Seg fault. You just cannot link code built with the two versions.
So what did they do? You can't just recompile the entire world overnight.
They implemented what's called a dual ABI. It was an incredible feat of engineering. Using inline namespaces, they essentially have two different string classes living side by side in the library.
So there's std.string and a secret second std.cx11.string.
Exactly. And the linker chooses the right one. But it still meant that major Linux distros Fedora, Debian, had to recompile thousands and thousands of packages. It was a monumental effort.
And the scar tissue from that is what you call ossification.
Precisely. The committee is now terrified of ever breaking ABI again. We see proposals to optimize std.regex, which is famously slow, get rejected because it would change the object size.
So we're basically stuck with some designs because the cost of changing them is just too high.
It's Hiram's law in action. Users depend on implementation details, like size of string, even when they're not supposed to.
That's incredible. So, bringing us to today, we have SSO std.string. What's new? We got std.stringView in C++17.
String view is basically the answer to a problem Google and LLVM had for years. Passing const std.string in is still expensive if all you have is a char. You have to create a temporary object. A string view is just a pointer and a length, no allocation. It owns nothing.
Which is great for performance, but it sounds dangerous.
Extremely. It's the #1 cause of a new class of lifetime bugs. A string view pointing to a temporary string that's already been destroyed.
A dangling pointer.
And the compiler doesn't always catch it. It's a very sharp tool.
And what about Unicode? C++20 gave us char8 and std.u8 string. Is that the solution?
In theory, yes. It gives you type safety for UTF-8. In practice, it's kind of failed to launch.
Why?
Because std.string is the vocabulary type. File system APIs, networking APIs, they all speak std.string. If you use U8 string, you just end up casting it back all the time. It's a second-class citizen.
Okay, so that brings us to the very latest stuff. std.format in C++20.
Now that is a philosophical shift. For decades, std.string did everything, including formatting .std.format, which comes from the FMT library, finally decouples storage from formatting.
So std.string is just the bucket of bytes.
And formatting is a separate, type-safe, and much faster concern. We're finally starting to unbundle that monolith Herb Sutter complained about all those years ago.
We are. Wow, what a journey. From PDP-7s and segmented memory through the COW wars, the multicore revelation, the ABI trauma, all the way to today.
It just goes to show performance is relative. CKW is the right choice for 1998 hardware. SSO is the right choice for today's hardware. The world changed around the code.
And std.string is a survivor. It's not pretty, it's got scars, but it works.
It's battle-hardened.
I think the big lesson is what you called the vocabulary type trap. Once something becomes the default way to talk in a language, it's almost impossible to replace.
That's the key. You can invent better designs, but you can't displace 40 years of momentum.
So here's a final thought for all of you listening. Go look at your own code bases, look at the optimizations you're writing today, and ask yourself, are you writing the next small string optimization? Or are you writing the next allocator for a 16-bit segmented memory model that's going to confuse engineers in 30 years?
That is a terrifying thought to end on.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.